of year when people are thinking about making donations. So, we want to talk about what nonprofits can really do, especially in partnership with the private sector and the public sector. To me, it's leverage. It's all about leverage. It's about coming together, leveraging each other's strengths and networks to have a larger, much larger impact. And we sure know that we need to have a much larger impact right now, right? In order to save communities from the ravages of the climate crisis. I mean, just look at what's happened in North Carolina and Florida and Tennessee and places that have not really been familiar or expecting these kinds of ravages, right? So today we're going to hear from the head of a nonprofit that is actually doing that. They're leveraging these other entities, coordinating with other nonprofits, partnering with companies in the public sector to get that work done and spread the word. So pull up your chair, put on your earbuds, prepare to take notes in case you want to steal some of these strategies and help your community that way. And we'll go on an adventure to find out how to leverage all these partnerships. Welcome to Electric Ladies Podcast. We share stories, insights, tips, and advice from remarkably innovative women working on the front lines of corporate responsibility, energy, sustainability, climate, and ESG related issues. I'm your host, Joan Michelson. We talk about careers, leadership, innovation, technologies, always bringing a new perspective. Find us anywhere you like to listen to podcasts on our website, electricladiespodcast.com, and through my Forbes blog as well. And please pass it on to your friends and leave us a 5-star review. It helps other people find us. If you are at an inflection point yourself looking for support with your ESG work or your career, please reach out to me. In all the chaos swirling around us, there is a lot of opportunity, and we don't want you to be flailing or missing out. You can find me on Twitter or Threads at Joan Michelson or LinkedIn, and let me know you're a listener. I've met some wonderful people this way. So it doesn't matter what industry you're in either, by the way. This episode is brought to you by Competent Boards, a comprehensive training program for board members and aspiring board members. Full disclosure, I am faculty and have the sustainability and ESG designation certification myself. Powerful group of global leaders who are helping you get the skills, strategic perspective, and frankly, the confidence you need for today's boardrooms and even conference rooms, especially around the kinds of issues we talk about on Electric Ladies podcast. And you can find them at competentboards.com. And some of you have asked me about that, which is really fun. So the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Investment Act, and the CHIPS and Science Act together are investing about $3 trillion in funding and financial incentives in the transition to a clean energy economy, making communities more resilient. But it's only a start, believe it or not. So much more is needed. Dr. Vanessa Chan, Chief Commercialization Officer of the Department of Energy, told me on this show that the point of those bills is to catalyze $30 trillion more in private capital. My goodness. A significant segment of that private capital to be deployed comes from foundations and other nonprofit organizations. And they have a special ability to reach some of the most vulnerable, maybe tackle some of the most desperate challenges, kind of fill in where the government and the private sector writ large really is not going or can't go, right? But it takes all of us right now. And in the US, only 3% of total philanthropy is directed to environmental causes. That is unacceptable, people. And that's all according to Giving USA. But think about that. I mean, let's just say 30 cents of every dollar that you have, or 3 cents of every dollar that you have is going to environment. I mean, that's not going to do it, people. And globally, it's worse. It's less than 2% that goes to climate mitigation efforts. And we're all in this together. I mean, Mother Nature is not waiting on any of us, right? So as my guest today has said, quote, only together can we create a global collective movement delivering effective and impactful action at speed and scale, close quote. Yes, we need speed and scale. So, how do we scale the nonprofit funding, and what's the best way to deploy that capital to help the most people? Let's ask an expert. I'd like you to meet Kate Williams. She is CEO of 1% for the Planet. They are one of the top nonprofits that over 5,000 businesses in 60 countries, you heard that correct, are collaborating with to expedite positive change for the environment and people. You may have seen badges or signs that say something to the effect that 1% of our profits are being donated to 1% for the planet. And that's who this is. So now you're going to get to know exactly who they are. 1% for the Planet was founded in 2002 by Yvonne Chouinard, founder of Patagonia, and Craig Matthews, founder of Blue Ribbon Flies. We'll find out more about it as we chat. Before joining 1% in 2014, Kate was executive director of the Northern Forest Canoe Trail. My goodness, a true outdoors person. A nonprofit focused on a 740-mile-long water trail and surrounding communities and waterways across the Northern Forest in Vermont. Wow. Okay. I am a city girl. We can talk about all these outdoor. I love it though. The nature stuff is beautiful. Kate earned a BA in history from Princeton and a master's in science and management at MIT School of Management. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Kate Williams to Electric Ladies Podcast. Welcome, Kate, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm psyched to be here and engage in this conversation.
Good. So, first of all, for the uninitiated, tell us about 1% for the Planet and how your unique business model works.
Yeah. So, listening to your introduction, even I can feel a little overwhelmed by the scale of what we are trying to accomplish. And 1% for the Planet is really set up as a way to sort of break it down and create a pathway to action that kind of gets us through the overwhelm. So the way it works is that we have businesses, as you mentioned, who are members, and they're actually supporting environmental partners at the level of 1% of revenues. So it's actually not profits, it's revenues. Wow. And that's been true since our founding, and it's quite intentional because revenues are, whether you have an up year or a down year, you invest in the things that matter, and the planet matters. And that's what 1% is. And, we're really created, like 1% is a big number. 1% of revenues is a big number, but you can wrap your head around it. You can take that step. And so our model really exists as a way to invite and build a growing movement of companies who take that step to do that, build in that strategic give back, and to do that every year, and to drive impact at scale. And so in terms of that scale, last year we certified $100 million US of support going from these companies to environmental partners, and we're on track. Our goal is to get to $1 billion in lifetime giving, cumulative giving, since we were founded, within the next couple of years.
So thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think it's some of the folks that I've seen signs of that say 1% of our profits are going to 1%. So maybe that's where that came from. But so how does this actually work? I mean, so your people, like, I buy a t-shirt, right? And it goes to, or somebody buys a computer or goes on a trip and United Airlines or something donates, right? So that all goes into a fund? Does that go into the Planet Impact Fund, or how does that work, and how do you allocate it from there?
Yeah, it's great to kind of break it down. So we actually don't operate as a foundation. So we have our membership model, and then we have our Planet Impact Fund, which are essentially two separate like products, if you will. So I'll describe our membership model. That's what we've had since our founding. And then our Planet Impact Fund also describe that, but that's a more recent addition, and they're connected, but not like integrated, as you were saying. So the membership model, the way that works is that members, again, we don't operate as a foundation, so the money doesn't all come to us and then we distribute it. It's actually more of a sort of advising model. So when a company joins, They do pay a dues fee to us, but then the rest of their 1% they will give directly to environmental partners. We advise them. We are a strategic partner to help companies figure out how they want to allocate that giving, how to do it most strategically, what they're trying to solve for. We really help them to kind of build that matrix of what they're trying to accomplish with their giving. And that's really exciting because a lot of times the shift is from seeing philanthropy as this kind of nice to have at the end of the year and shifting it into being this like strategic tool to drive change, which is super awesome to see. And then at the end of each year, we certify that giving. And so that's where when you see a business with the 1% for the planet logo, that means that they have certified that they have given that 1%. And that's really important because it's a mark of credibility of, and of like a real authentic commitment. Our Planet Impact Fund lives alongside that. It's a philanthropic tool that enables anyone, whether or not they're a member, to make a donation into this dual impact fund because every dollar is invested for positive impact. And then at the end of each year, we donate 10% to a portfolio of environmental partners. And the kind of glue across all of this is our 4 impact areas. So we have thought through and categorized and sort of created a really awesome, expansive definition of environmental that is articulated through these 4 impact areas, which are resilient communities, just economies, rights to nature, and conservation and restoration. So all of the impact giving that our members are doing, all of the work of the Planet Impact Fund is flows through these impact areas. And that's how we're driving impact on the ground. Our environmental partners are working in those areas.
That's so interesting. So are you, um, so many questions going through my head. How do you actually certify? Do they like give you a report of X amount of dollars went to, the fund for the just transition or nature conservancy or whatever? Or are you giving them a list of environmental nonprofits that they can donate to? Or how does that,
Yeah.
how are you certifying and how are you helping them decide where to put that money?
Yeah, it's a blend of both. So we do vet nonprofits and we maintain a directory of approved environmental partners. So at any time, any member, and actually there's also public access to that directory to see, who are these approved partners. So members can, give to any of those that would count toward their 1%. They also can recommend new nonprofits because a lot of times, a company might have headquarters in an area where we haven't worked as much before. So they may say, hey, would this one count? And we can put that nonprofit through our vetting process. Some companies know and are able to figure out who they want to give to once we've given them advice. Other companies, we do a more robust kind of advising and recommending process with them. And it's all sort of driven by what the company wants and needs. And then to certify it, we have a portal that our awesome team has created that, is sort of like a more celebratory TurboTax in that you upload documentation of revenue, and the companies do this. The environmental partners, we really want them to just be to get the resources that they need to do work on the ground and not have to do a lot of the legwork. So our companies, the donors, are the ones who upload documentation of revenue and then documentation that they have given. So it might be a letter of acknowledgement from the nonprofit or a record of volunteer time, and all of that is uploaded. And then, once they're certified, that is noted and they're able to celebrate that and then, start a new year of impact.
Is it just dollars or does it include volunteering also?
It includes volunteering and in-kind donations as well, which can be, vary across different companies. So yeah, we have a
So,
flexible giving model,
yeah.
cash, but also there's the opportunity for flexibility.
Yeah, and then you have to kind of put a dollar amount on that too, right? I mean, it's like if we're having 40 hours of employee time at X dollars an hour, that equals Y in a donation, right? Kind of thing.
Exactly. We convert everything into the dollars so that like total impact number is the total of dollars given plus, any of the sort of non-cash but sort of value items that are provided.
Cool. Yeah, one of my clients who is in your program, there's no need to mention who, because I don't want to put anybody on the spot without their permission, but is because we support women, right, raising the visibility of women. They asked me what kinds of places and nonprofits that I would want the donation that they gave in our honor for a project that we did. um, and that was cool. And so they gave to one of them, what I think was a girls' school in Cameroon, and one was oh, I forget. But anyway, so it's kind of to your point of moderately customized. So talk about, you have some cool projects on your website. So tell us some stories about actually how this is working on the ground. Okay, so your point is to create speed and scale, right, of impact. So talk about the impact. Like, tell us about some communities or projects that are really that you can see came, with uh, urging or support from 1% for the planet, and how they're doing, what they're doing and how they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to share some stories, and there are literally thousands of partnerships. So if you imagine
Good.
that, most companies are giving to at least one, if not more, environmental partners, and we have, you know, 5,000 companies. So it's literally thousands, and that's one of the powerful things. And then I will share some specific stories. But one of the really cool things when I mention 100 million or our goal of getting to a billion, those are big numbers that we often think about as just big lumps. When in fact, for 1% for the planet, that $1 billion goal will be made up of hundreds of thousands of distributed donations with decision making by companies on the ground with our advice, which is really, really powerful because it's this like uniquely democratic form of giving, because it really is allocating this giving strategically. You mentioned one company who's like, we care about women and girls, so we want to do environmental giving that's in service of women and girls, which is a very important feature of our impact areas. And that's awesome. And so they're able to thoughtfully build that partnership and make that giving happen on the ground. We have to get to your question around sort of specific stories. We have just recently at our we had an event called our Global Summit. We had a environmental partner on stage talking about their work. It's called the Thin Green Line Foundation, and it was a really, really compelling moment for all of us who were there. They're a nonprofit that works in service of rangers. So, rangers on the ground who are the ones who are protecting wildlife, the Thin Green Line, protecting wildlife from poachers, from encroaching development. It's very dangerous. Rangers are injured or killed on an annual basis with, they're shot by poachers. They're, attacked by wild animals. So, things happen, and this nonprofit is working in this really interesting intersection to support these rangers who are supporting wildlife, but also to support their families if a ranger is, injured or incapacitated or even killed. And so, we had at that event several members in real time sort of step up and say, this really speaks to me and I want to stand up and support this. And so that was really cool to see that. We don't have a whole lot of that kind of like real-time pitch moments, but it was really powerful. And I think an example that I want to share, just because it's so kind of poignantly points to that connection of people and planet. Rangers are really truly standing on this line between human communities and wildlife, and in really thoughtful ways offering that protection. So that's one of, again, thousands of stories.
I love that. And what you can't see is my wall is covered in photographs from an African safari I did in Tanzania. And I was in Kenya and Tanzania. And so I especially relate to that. I mean, they're just stunning, majestic animals, right? And we had guides right outside our door, but they're almost more to guard the animals from us
Hmm.
as to guard us from the animals, right? I mean, I remember opening my cabin door in Ngorongoro Crater, and there's a Cape buffalo barely 12 feet in front of me. And I'm like, why? I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And,
So,
and one other thing, just to add on that story, part of the presentation that we had was, we had one of the female rangers, which is, there aren't a lot, but this woman was just awesome and so strong and capable, and had a really interesting story to share. So, for this podcast, I think that's important to mention too, that, just a woman sort of standing on that thin green line. And you're right, it's, both protecting the wildlife from encroachment from people, but then also, understanding, how to sort of protect and keep safe those communities that live in these, in these spaces in between. So it was really
yeah,
fascinating and
I love
awesome
that.
female
The
power.
spaces, yeah, the spaces in between. That's a great way to put it. What about, you mentioned resilient communities too. So, what about? I mean, tell me a story or two about some communities that you're helping to be resilient, or that your members or your folks in the Planet Impact Fund are helping. So, for example, and by the way, I've also had Zainab Salbi on of Daughters for Earth, who you may know, and Fashion Impact Fund. In fact, I just spoke at the UN during Climate Week with them. So, an event that they helped produce. So, tell us about. I mean, there's so many angles to this, right? There's so much intersection.
Mhm.
So, talk about some resilient community projects.
Yeah, so
One.
I'm just looking at because there's so
I'm
many.
sure you need a
Yeah.
database of them, I bet.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's so fun. Like, there are ones that stick in my mind from having just been in an event, but then, there's so many more. But, our resilient communities, the kind of categories for that are environmental education, sustainable cities, climate adaptation, and toxics and pollution. So as you can imagine, there would be a lot in all of those. And, like in environmental education, there are several projects in the Bay Area and in New York City, not surprisingly, in sort of bigger cities where, there's urban gardening that's happening, that's engaging, young people in having an experience of like getting their hands dirty and growing food. Harlem Grown is in New York City, and they've, been a partner that we've worked with, and many others. And, those are really powerful, visible projects, either, kind of putting a garden where once there was a vacant lot, or just simply connecting young people to a community garden, which in a urban environment can be an incredibly important sort of access to nature moment, just to understand food. And food, I would say, is a kind of red thread through a lot, because for so many people, no matter where you live, whether you live in a rural, urban, global south, developed, Western culture, wherever you live, food is a direct connection to the earth. And for some people, the ways in which they experience food is very disconnected from the earth. So, we have some nonprofits doing really powerful work to kind of use that kind of hopefully daily act of, eating food, or in some cases providing access to food. So we have food banks that are sort of connecting the dots as well, not just serving food to those who have less access to food, but also, providing it in healthy ways, and, eliminating food from the waste stream. So food is a really interesting one that threads through a lot of these different categories and a lot of different communities. To your question around resilience, is when we get better at connecting the dots between sort of food and both people's health and the health of the planet, that often can, really, that whole chain can be visible at communities, even very urban ones, again, like, the Bay Area or New York City in the United States.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I had Amy Bachman on of DC Central Kitchen a few years ago. They do amazing work in this in collecting, quote, ugly fruit and vegetables and then making meals that go to people who need it or selling it in some cases, selling, almost catering services, right? There are so many of these. I mean, probably you could mine my episodes, 450 episodes, and find some others that might fit into your paradigm. I mean, the Just Transition Fund, I don't know if you know them, Heidi Binko was on. They're helping coal communities transition to a clean energy economy. What I love about what you're doing is it really is leverage. I mean, you're bringing, you're helping, you're taking. It seems to me that you're also taking away the hmm, how can I say this? In my experience, a lot of executives say, "Well, I don't know what to do, or I don't know where to help, or it's overwhelming." To your point, right? And you're saying, "Well, great, we'll help you." We don't get any money from these people. We just know who the good ones are, and we vetted them already. It's almost like the purpose that the United Way has served, right? In some ways, in sort of disease nonprofit world mostly, but you're helping them expedite their decision making process too. I bet, which is great. How do you get these companies to sign up? You mentioned how you track then vet the certified donations, but how are you? I mean, how do you just like call up United and say we want to get 1% of your revenue? I mean, how does this? I mean, how does it really work?
Yeah, it's there's a bunch of different sort of pathways. So, in terms of how we get into the conversation in the first place, there's referrals from existing members, which we always welcome. There's warm connections from just stakeholders in our world, anywhere from members to environmental partners to board members to donors. We always, those warm introductions are the key. We also, do have an active, marketing function. So we get the word out, and we have a form that people can fill out online, where they can say, "Hey, I'm interested. I'd like to get more information." So we have different kind of portals, if you will, for how people can access us or get informed, or us go out and say, "Hey, we would love to have a conversation with you." So some push and some pull. And then once we're in those conversations, that's when it gets really fun, because for every business, it's a little bit of a different unlock. So I go into these conversations, sort of like psyched and sort of thinking, okay, I've got the multi-tool of 1% for the planet's many different kind of tools that are available. So for some companies, employee engagement may be a really important thing. And so we can talk about like ways in which 1% for the planet can be, and we have great case studies from our existing membership about how 1% for the planet can be a really valuable resource for engaging employees in terms of, purpose, direct contact with purpose, volunteer opportunities, creative ways for engaging employees in the actual giving. So lots of good examples of that. For other companies, they may be just straight up interested in like, I want to understand how this might lift sales. And we can talk about like the ways in which 1% for the planet is a, really good lever for consumer engagement, and ways that, it helps consumers to identify and build loyalty with the brand. And we have some case studies for that as well. So that's like a business case. We have other companies who are like, I'm really interested in the sort of opportunity to tell a compelling brand story, because we've been doing some sustainability work, but we just have kind of boring data. And so we want to, build on our impact and also access some great storytelling. And all of that is, we can, sort of tap into that. And then one other thing that, and usually most companies, it's not just one of those. It's kind of figuring out like what's the first tool and then what's the next one. All of those, we also, always share the opportunity of being part of this community of really amazing companies who are making this shared commitment. And we're across more than 60 different industries. We're in, more than, I think, 70 countries at this point. So we're very diverse geographically. We're diverse across different sectors. So it's not like-minded companies or even sort of like companies. They're very different companies, but there is this core shared commitment to planet and people, which means that when we connect at our events, or when we make direct connections for companies who are interested, there's this incredible energy that's released, because it's very different than trade shows or other things where you're kind of with your with your lookalikes, and this is a diverse community but with a really core shared value, and that's really, really powerful and a great opportunity, because a lot of companies are able to get ideas about how did you handle this from across that community.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. I love being with groups like that where you have one thing that's almost kind of obscure and common, but it's not your typical, professional conference, right? So you said something interesting that sort of triggered me for a second on a what what's changed? You've been there like 10 years now, right? And how have you seen the priorities of all the players that you're interfacing with? Because you've such an interesting vantage point, because you're kind of the hub of the wheel, right? So what changes have you seen over the 10 years? Is it in um dollars? Is it in types of people? Is it in how people see the economy? I mean, what are the trends that you've seen? And I'm just throwing out ideas, you can ignore them,
Mhm.
but just to get your brain going. But like, what are the trends in the that you have seen evolve over that 10 years that you've been there?
Yeah, just like objectively in terms of scale, like one thing that's like fun to sort of point out is in our first, we're 22 years old. In our first 10 years, we certified the same amount over those 10 years that we certified last year alone, that 100 million. So
Wow.
we have, one thing that's changed is we've just grown the movement. And that was our charge when 1% for the Planet was created. That it was created to be a movement builder. So we have done that. But then more specifically to your question around what's changed in the last 10 years, I would say a few of the things that have changed. One is that there's more explicit consumer interest in allocating their purchasing dollars to brands that broadly they believe in, and more specifically that are solution creators or solution makers, and that solution may be in the product or service itself, or it may be in the way the business does something like 1% for the planet or shows up. So I do think that's been a trend that particularly since I would say like 2018, we really saw accelerating. And these things ebb and flow. This past year, I would say, has been a year of uncertainty. And so there has been, more, it's a little hard to know what the consumer trends are saying, but that has been overall a growing trend. Another trend that we've seen in our membership is, whereas when I started 10 years ago, it was almost entirely a CPG, consumer products brand. Like when we would talk about 1% for the planet, it was kind of along the lines of like, we have things that people put a logo on. Our members have like physical products that live on shelves with the logo. Now we just reported out to our global summit and did our kind of tally of industry stats and things like that. And actually, the number one industry now in terms of number of members are professional services. So that's marketing agencies, photographers, um, you know, businesses that do not have a product that you can put on a shelf, but have services that people want to buy. So I would say, one of the things that we're really seeing and celebrating is that increasingly 1% for the planet isn't, allocated to a single, to products or to a single industry. It's really very diverse, and more companies are seeing the value regardless of what industry they're in.
Oh, that's great. I'd love to get some data on that if you can find some data points on that. That's really terrific. And thank you for that anecdotally. I appreciate it. Are you seeing any a trend? I mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, et cetera, earlier. Are you finding that any of the um, communities or any of the companies or other nonprofits are leveraging or tapping into the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Act? I mean, are they saying, look, we're getting, we can get a tax write-off if we do X now because of this, and we report it this way, and you can help us because you would give us the bona fides, if you will, to qualify or to show that it's, uh, it's assured, it's verified. Or the other way, are you having people, organizations come to you and say, we want to do X, Y, and Z. We see there's some money from the government. We can leverage, again, getting back to my point about leverage, that you can kind of help them bridge that gap, right, to increase scale and speed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes and no. Like the way we work is that we will have members, the businesses who are doing the giving, who may express an interest of, hey, I'm aware of the IRA and I want to be able to give in a way that unlocks that. And then we can help them to find nonprofits where that may be the case. That's not super common with businesses right now, but if where it comes up, we can respond to that. And similarly, if there are nonprofits who are sort of accessing those funds, there's ways that they can communicate that. Our role is to use our 4 impact areas to facilitate kind of an exchange of resources and impact. So we are not experts in one country's particular sort of regulatory or financial opportunities, but we are experts in how to access the experts on the ground in multiple different countries. And that's kind of where we work, is connecting the dots. So if someone's interested in advocacy around, sort of in a particular electoral cycle, we don't work on the particular legislative issues ourselves, but we're able to connect the business to the nonprofits that are working in that area. And that is happening across many different areas.
Well, that makes sense. And that's what I was thinking, is that because I get, contacted by some companies to go, oh, I know we can access it, but it's overwhelming. So, can you help? And so I would think from the nonprofit side, that would be definitely something that a need you could fill, in a way, right? Especially because of the Justice 40 component, where if you make a contribution to or improving a disadvantaged neighborhood or disadvantaged community group of some kind, there's an added benefit for that, right? From the funding and the tax write-off. So, a couple things, and then I'd like to get some career advice from you for mid-career women, which your team might have told you I like to get. But before we get there, on the other side, one of the challenges right now that I see, and I've written a lot about and consulted with some organizations about, is the communication piece, right? And especially in the environment that we're in today, and other use of the word environment, in the cultural more milieu that we're in. So, what do you find is the most effective way to engage people who are not already mobilized or motivated to address the climate challenge? What's the entry point? Is there language? What have you found that works?
I think for us, what works is 2 things. One is that we have a sort of clear and simple theory of change, which is that simple actions done repeatedly in community are how we drive global change at scale. And we have the proof of that through our model. And so we're really able to invite people into taking a simple action. The other piece of it is that they get to choose that simple action, but it's within a framework. I had a conversation when I was in Wyoming not too long ago, and this guy came up to me after I had spoken, and he's like, "Oh, I get it. It's like paying taxes, but you get to decide where the taxes go," which was sort of a funny way of describing it, because it is like you're making a 1% commitment. It's 1% of revenues. So every year, you have this commitment, and you get to decide where you want to allocate that. And it's so amazing to see the kind of light just get brighter and brighter as businesses who are members, sort of see the value of that and the ways in which it's a lift and not an expense. That when you get to choose how you're making this investment and what you believe in, it's amazing. So I think that, that simplicity of our theory of change plus the kind of customization and differentiation it offers is really powerful. And that creates a way to your question of, for people who are like, I'm not so sure, or I don't know what to do, or maybe I'm overwhelmed, or maybe I'm like, maybe even jaded. We're the kind of, hey, take action. We have a lot of different viewpoints within our network. We're a very diverse network. We don't mandate that you give to this or that nonprofits. We have nonprofits working in different areas, all within our impact areas. So we know what we stand for, and there's a lot of diversity within that. So it creates a great way for a lot of diverse points of view to come together in a shared space.
Love that. So it sounds like you're showing them that they have agency, that there's something that they can do. And it can be small. It doesn't have to be ginormous. It can be something small and it can be tailored to their world and their values and um their priorities and their goals, right?
Absolutely. And that ties to the way we vet our environmental partners. So again, we have our 4 impact areas, and then we have eligibility guidelines, and we vet our partners, and they fit into those impact areas. And our goal is not to create a top 100 list of the best nonprofits. Our goal is to have a really good base of knowledge about the impact that these nonprofits drive, so that we can find the best fit nonprofits for a given member. Because the best, most inspiring nonprofit or other sort of impact driver for you may be different than for me, and ideally we both are able to find the best fit partners for us, and that's what we're doing all the time.
Yeah, so there's a few that I might recommend to you if you don't have them already. There's this wonderful woman I had on you might want to listen to who has Women Climate Centers International in Kenya.
Cool.
And they really deserve a whole lot more money. I keep trying to tell people about them I go in stages, but they really deserve a lot more than they get. They what they do is they help communities in their region address daily challenges, but in a way that helps to also address climate change or mitigate their community against climate change, which to me is magical.
Mm-hmm.
So her name is Rosemary Atieno, and she told me the story, for example, of a community that came to them with a cholera epidemic.
Mm.
And she went in and realized that it was about the water. And they got them a well and they got them clean water. But in the process of doing that, they freed the women up from having to go collect the water. As you may know, in Africa, a lot of the women are carrying water on their heads, and that puts them at great physical risk actually doing
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And they have great posture, by the way, but they
That
it's
strong
dangerous.
necks.
Yeah, I saw them. They were great. But and got them, the women then got educated and they built a business around the water system, et cetera, et cetera. And so they ended up building up, having all these ancillary, beautiful, positive outcomes. And by the way, they eliminated cholera, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
kids didn't get sick anymore, and the women didn't, nobody got sick and me and blah, blah. So they created this wonderful virtuous cycle by uh, solving that problem that nobody associated with climate change,
Mm-hmm.
right? But they found the solution that way,
I love
right?
that. Yep. And that's a great,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great example of the kinds of things we're seeing and celebrating within our, network, is these creative solutions that most of us wouldn't necessarily know about when we come in, and we may say like, I want to support climate, so I should give here or there. And we're able to say, based on all of what you're trying to solve for, like maybe consider this one because it seems like it could be a good fit. So we're often able to elevate, really innovative and creative solutions that may not have been sort of visible or known to a donor when they come in.
Right, and they wouldn't necessarily found in a Google search or an AI search, right? Yeah, no, I love that. And I get some also just incoming people, right, reaching out, especially related to the intersection of women and the climate challenge, right? So, before I let you go, I like to get career advice, particularly for mid-career women. So women who have, say, 10, 15 years of experience, they've got an education, they know what they're good at, they want to make money, they want to advance in their career, and they want to make a difference. So, what would be advice that you would give to them?
I think I would say a couple things. One is um, sort of step forward and step up before you think you might be ready. I think particularly as women, we can sort of think, oh, I need to check all these boxes in order to be able to do XYZ. And that may be stepping up into leadership or people management. It may be stepping up just into more subject area expertise. And I want to be clear on that, like, becoming a, you know, CEO or C-suite can be one way that you progress, but you can also just become like really deeply knowledgeable in a particular area. Both of those are valuable. And in both areas, we sometimes as women and just as humans can maybe hold ourselves back. So I would say like step up before you're ready. And in my experience, I have done that and have always found that support appears once I've taken this step. And you can't know until you take the step, but there are people there and resources there to support you when you are bold. So I recommend that, because I think if you don't do that, sometimes you can find that your mid-career is past before you know it, and you haven't, taken that step, and then it can be harder to do it later. Not impossible, but just harder. So go for it. The other thing is stay open to serendipity. I think we can often be so oriented when we're in planning our careers to think it all hinges on our planning. And so we may forget that serendipity is sometimes how the opportunities that we get to step into are shown to us. So my, kind of every opportunity that I've had has been some combination of planning and serendipity. And when I haven't paid attention to the serendipity, I think I've missed some things. So stay open.
I love that. And I've had that happen. I mean, I've had people show up. One of my clients calls it or betters, being open or betters that and I never know where they're coming from. I mean, I have people in my life who have nothing to do directly in their work with climate and energy, for example, but it's kind of a side passion. And then they'll just as a kind of, oh, I thought you might enjoy meeting so and so. And then that meeting turns into a whole slew of cool projects or whatever. And I would never have even thought that this was a person it was just like, a friend and a business colleague, but in a completely different context. And so you also, to your point of serendipity, the source may maybe surprise you too, right? It's not just what happens. It's,
Mhm.
oh, it comes from that. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's
And
cool.
I use myself as an example. I did not ever say the words like, I want to be a CEO when I grew up. I I stayed open to what I was interested in doing. And fortunately, like had some moments where I realized, or in one case, like my job before the Northern Forest Canoe Trail, my husband was like, you know, um, figuratively like shaking me and saying, Kate, do you see what is being offered to you? Like you should say, yes, you shouldn't keep looking away just because you had not planned this at this time. So, and that, put me on a path that has been really valuable. So I do think staying open and noticing, and you get to say no, but if you just always stick to your plan, you might miss some things, and your plan might be lesser than what's possible for you.
That's true. And I'm glad you said that because one thing I'll just add before we go is I have people coming to me for career advice and they say, oh, well, I was someone so talk to me about maybe being in this role or that role, but I can't do that, whatever. And I look at them and go, wait a minute. They think you can.
Yeah.
They think you can. And that's kind of all that matters. Do you think, I mean, look at so and so and so. Do you think Mary Barra, was primo confident and had been there for 30 years, but she'd never been CEO of General Motors before? It's not like you have to have done the exact thing before. I mean, we're a puzzle. We're all a jigsaw puzzle. And when, like, for you, it became a whole different puzzle when you got that job. And now you're doing this, which is even a whole different puzzle, right? But it's all the
Mhm.
same pieces of you. They're just put together differently and prioritized differently, right? And it opens up whole new world. So, yeah, I love that. That's perfect. I love that. Stay open to serendipity. Well, thank you so much, Kate. Any final thoughts before I let you get back to your life?
I don't think so. Thank you so much. This is a fun conversation, and just encourage people to check out our website and reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that'd be great. And it's 1% for the planet all spelled out, right?
Yes, 1%fortheplanet.org.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much for joining us on Electric Ladies Podcast, Kate Williams of 1% for the Planet. There you go, 1%fortheplanet.org. That's easy to remember. So, how are you deciding where to donate to this year? What are you focused on? What kind of projects are you excited about? Let us know. Post it to us on Twitter and threads at Joan Michelson. Send us any questions there as well, and you may win a complimentary 30-minute coaching session with me. You never know. And please subscribe to our mailing list to stay abreast of our amazing guests like Kate, our articles and career advice. You can subscribe on our website, electricladiespodcast.com. I'm Joan Michelson. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.